2 months later, on the stage of the London Palladium, Chandler sang the lead in Prince of Foxes and brought down the house. Critics would say that his voice haunted them even the next day, and that they tried to imitate him in the shower to no avail. It was a triumph. Chandler Tuttle was the king of tenors. He received an embarrassment of flowers and notes in his dressing room, and one of the notes was from his old friend Richard Tuttle, from the same school. Richard had sung along with him for years, but eventually dropped out of it and went off to do something or other. They had not seen each other in over a year, and Chandler was excited to catch up with him. They would meet in Chandler's hotel, down in the opulent bar that was modeled after Versailles after Prince's last night. In the meantime, Chandler devoted himself to maintaining his voice and his health, and abstained from any vice. Politely abstaining from going out to the pub or the club with the cast, he knew he'd look like a high and mighty tenor, but he hoped they would understand that it was discipline, not pride. They did, but they didn't. It was a lose-lose situation, and he decided he didn't care. He did go to the after-party to smile and receive praise and return it, but he was eager to get back to the hotel and see his friends, so he left early, feigning fatigue. In the hotel, he asked for a martini and admired the lovely bar, its trompe-l'oeil and antique French furniture, until he saw his old friend swagger in. Richard was wearing red suede moccasins with some kind of gold-plated hardware across the instep that looked like a snaffle bit, beige slacks, and a white button-down with thin red vertical stripes that made Chandler think of a high-end candy store salesman, with the top two buttons undone and his cuffs rolled up halfway to his elbows, exposing smooth skin with very little peach fuzz, a gold Cuban link Versace necklace, one gold earring, and an ultramarine belt that matched his eyes. "Look at you, all GQ like a poof," Chandler teased. Richard smiled and shrugged. "I've been running in richer circles," he said when he came with his arms outstretched for a hug. One has to dress the part. They embraced and stood up to look at each other up and down, sizing each other up. "Been keeping in shape," they said in unison, and laughed. "Jinx, buy me a soda," Chandler added. "What's that mean?" "Nothing. Have a seat." They both sat down on matching Louis Quinze bergères with foliate-carved gold beech and blue beige upholstery, and crossed their legs in the gentlemanly fashion. "I saw the show," Richard said. "Did you?" "Indeed. And you thought?" "You're getting better." "Sod off, I'm superb." "Modest, too. Did you like it?" "I did." "I'm ever so glad." "I know. You care so much what I think. So how have you been? Traveling much? I never see you around." "I've been good. Touring a lot. Just did a wee junket to the other Americas. Panama, Costa Rica, Mexico, Guatemala. And I'd wanted to go south, but duty called me back. Met a chap you'd find delightful. Mad as a March hare. I think that may be the reason for his nickname. People call him Rabbit." "Oh, yes?" "Bona fide loon. But charming in an odd way. You know, we got into a bit of a scrape together, and I watched him kill, I don't recall, 5 men? Something like that. Marvelous time." "Are you serious?" "It sounds awful, doesn't it? But it really was quite something. He's a bit of a daredevil, this fellow, going around and setting the world to rights, at least in his madcap way. He's buggered off to Morocco for a bit because he's in love with some girl he met on the internet." "Ah, the internet. Do you use it?" "A bit, to organize gigs and whatnot." "You?" "I do now. It makes international business a cinch." "Doesn't it, though? And what about you? What business are you into nowadays, Mr. International Cinch Neater?" Well, say, do you ever think about our parents?" Subtle change of subject. "But do you? Do you ever wonder who our parents were, where they are? Do you ever want to find them?" "I try not to. They left us behind. To hell with them." "I know. But it bugged me. So I went about looking. And I found my father." "Did you? That's wonderful. And what sort of man is he?" "A scoundrel." "Ah, no doubt. But a first-class scoundrel. Shall I tell you?" "By all means." "He's Ukrainian and old. And he's not just one of the cold, bloodthirsty Russian types you hear about, but one of the old-school rogues that'll throw everything at you he has, including his own children, before leaping upon you with fang and claw. No pity or mercy in his black heart. He left his village to seek his fortune in Europe and landed in Berlin in the 1930s. Oh, really? Yes. He arrived and saw that these people who called themselves socialists were in power. So he looked for a pretty daughter of an SS officer and seduced her. Poor thing was so wrapped around his finger that when she took him home and introduced him to Daddy, an SS officer. Christ. And he turned on his charm and won the guy over. So Herr Daddy saw that his little princess was going to marry my father, and that's all there was to it. And he decided the young man would need a job and a future, but something out of harm's way. Certainly not the party. He gave my father this bar they'd confiscated from the Jews and converted into an SS-only bar, and he took to that like a duck to water. Overnight success. Herr Daddy was pleased, and the young man was making money, and the princess was happy, and they could all keep an eye on him and make sure he wasn't banging the barmaid. Only he was banging the barmaid. How did you guess? It wasn't hard. Yeah, so he was banging the barmaid after hours, but he was worried that some of the clients would walk by and glance in the window. So he started looking around for a better place to shag her, and he found the attic. The attic, Chandler said in a dramatic voice. The attic of love. And you know how it is, in the midst of the act, flagrante delicto, between the foreplay and the actual throes of passion, when you're just glancing around the room and thinking of other things, like how much gin you need to buy, how much vodka, when the gas bill needs paid. Yeah? So he's looking around the attic, and he notices a secret door. Not a secret door, indeed, a secret door. It couldn't have been a very good secret if he saw it. You haven't met my father. Really? Really. Okay, so go on, a secret door. So he wraps up his business with the wench, and he sends her on her merry way and goes back up to the attic. And there he finds, in the secret door, skeletons! No. What then? Treasure. Pause. You're kidding, Chandler said. Nope. You jest, surely. Not in the least. Keep in mind, Jews tend to have money. And this was a Jewish bar. The Jews could not take all of their treasure with them when they fled Germany, so they stashed it and thought they'd be back in a month to get it after the so-called socialist movement had blown over. Only it hadn't. So all that wealth was sitting there waiting for my father to come in and find it. Chandler whistled. So he split. Not yet. He took the treasure out bit by bit to not arouse suspicion and fenced it around Berlin and amassed a fortune. Then he kicks the princess to the curb and gets the hell out of town, makes his way to Old Blighty, walks into a bank with his 2 suitcases full of Deutschmarks, and says he wants to cash them in for pounds sterling. And they look at him like he's an imbecile. Hello? We're going to war with that country. Their money isn't worth shit here. Oh my God. Yep. He storms out of there and throws those 2 suitcases full of money right into the gutter. Now he's penniless and homeless in Britain. Christ. If he hadn't sold everything, he could have... Oh, he knows. Trust me. He needs no one to tell him. Oh, poor guy. Poor guy? Are you serious? After what he'd done? And trust me, he didn't mope around Southampton docks for long. He did what he had to do, first as a thief, scrimping and saving and doing little jobs for gangsters, and then rose in the seedy London criminal underworld by virtue of his ruthlessness and complete lack of fear. Whoa, this is your father? Yes, and he sired many children that he didn't rear well into the twilight of his life, of which I am one. Some girl that he made to cry gave birth to me and left me in the orphanage where we grew up. Jesus, wonder how many brothers you may have had there. I may even be one. You don't have his eyes or his stubborn chin. True, that's where you got those? Apparently. Chandler had noticed an Asian girl sitting alone at the bar over Richard's shoulder, a beautiful girl with darkish skin and hair to her shoulders in a saffron dress, and despite his interest in the story, he had been glancing at her often. His gazes had been brief out of politeness, but this time his gaze lingered. Richard looked over his shoulder and saw her. See something you like? I do. That's Juleng. You know her? You could say that. What does that mean? Do you want to meet her? I would love to. Hold on. Fancy another drink? Chandler looked down and saw that he'd only an olive in the bottom of his glass and said, "Thanks." He watched his old friend get up out of his Louis XV bergère and swagger up to the bar. Richard always had a bit of a swagger, but only Chandler knew it was from his right leg being broken when they were children, and now being ever so slightly shorter than the left. Most people thought it was from his ego. Well, maybe it was a mix of both. Richard sidled up to the bar next to the Asian girl and told the bartender his order, then spoke to her. She glanced over at Chandler, and the singer dropped his gaze, embarrassed. He focused his attention on the pattern of the rug beneath his chair, and when he looked up again, Juleng was halfway to him. He froze. Her eyes were on him like she had been watching him, perhaps since she'd walked in to meet him. He knew that look well from groupies after a show, but he hadn't been expecting it. But maybe that's why she'd sat at the bar so long, waiting for his conversation to end. He stood and waited for her to arrive, trying not to look her up and down, but it wasn't easy. She was thin with shapely legs and a lovely face, and she held 2 martinis that Chandler did not notice at first. A quick glance at Richard watching him from the bar, and he saw his friend wink, raise his own glass and salute. Chandler looked back at the girl, at her eyes. "Hi," he said when she arrived and handed him his drink. "Hi, I'm Juleng." She had a California accent. "Chandler, it's a pleasure." "Pleasure's all mine." He glanced back at the bar, but Richard was gone. "I've heard a lot about you," she said, sitting demurely in Richard's chair and sipping her martini. "From Richard?" "No, I've been following your career. I have all your CDs, and I've seen a few of your shows." "Oh, really? Which ones?" "I wish I could have seen your show tonight." "Nah, I've done better." "You have the most amazing voice I've ever heard, and I swear, when you hit those high notes and belt them out for what seems like forever, you make me melt." "Oh, you're going to make me go red. So what do you do?" Lame question, I know. "Not at all. I do arts and crafts." "Oh, like what?" "Well, I've mostly been focusing on stuffed animals." I don't think I've ever met anyone who makes stuffed animals. It's something I got into a while ago. I do a line of them I call Belly Up, because they're all dead. Chandler choked on his martini and sputtered. She laughed, and it was a beautiful sound. "What?" he asked, when he could manage speech. "They're all dead stuffed animals. People love them." "What? Dead how? Like with X's for eyes?" "Yes, and a little pink tongue sticking out the side of their face. People laugh so hard when they see them, and then they buy them for their friends as gifts." "Where is this? Do you have a store?" "No, I get a booth at craft shows. Jewelry, too." "You make jewelry?" "Mm-hmm. I do necklaces and bracelets, all kinds of stuff. But I like to do pieces that are quirky and clever instead of just run-of-the-mill stuff you can get anywhere." "Do you have anything I can see?" "Maybe later." There was something in the way she said it that seemed full of subtext, like she didn't have anything on hand but was feeling out whether she wanted this conversation to continue somewhere else. He didn't push it. He relaxed then because he realized, thinking about how she'd recognized him and started off the conversation with praise, that yes, she had been sitting over there waiting to talk to him. "So, what's your favorite stuffed animal to make?" She said. "Tough one. I guess giraffes, because of the extra work involved. Sometimes I have the animals flat in the middle with a black tire track going across it, so it looks like roadkill, and I did a giraffe like that once. I think it was my favorite. It just looks so goofy. I realize it's macabre, but the people always laugh when they see it, so it's not sick. Well, no, some people think it's sick, but they're usually soccer moms." "I've heard that term, but I'm afraid I've never met one." "What, roadkill?" "Ha! No, soccer moms." "Oh, well, I guess since you're English, every mother you ever met was a soccer mom. It's really big over here, isn't it? Football." "Well, I wouldn't know, really." She looked at him quizzically, and he debated whether he should let the conversation go in that direction. To hell with it, he decided. "I'm an orphan." "Oh." "Yes, and I grew up in an orphanage, and then I went to a private school for boys, and when I grew up, I never really had much experience with mothers, mine